The Bear is one of my favorite shows to have come out this decade. With season 4 having been released a couple weeks ago and a 5th airing next year, I thought it would be time to talk about my love for The Bear. I've seen many people make a lot of essays for the show, but I haven't seen a single person make one for the importance of food, or in this case, the unimportance of it, and how many of the characters overcome trauma within the show, but more on that later. The way that food is used in The Bear is quite interesting, as it is most often used to help convey an arc of what a character is going through, their emotions, or to help solidify a theme the show is going for. But most importantly, it is used to help portray its overarching message of family throughout the show. At times this is used pretty overtly. I mean, it doesn't really take a genius to figure out that something like brijal is a dish that is special to Carmy. Other times it is used in a more subtle way to help emphasize the themes and story beats it's going for. While I will be delving into the more muted aspects of how food is utilized within the show, that doesn't mean I won't occasionally state the obvious to help with narrative cohesion, and in doing so, it will make the video easier to follow along. The video will be divided into sections, with each section talking about each character and how food and family, or something related to it, correlates to them in significant ways. Afterwards, I'll talk about why food is so important, and what it represents within the broader scale of the show. So without further wait, let's dive in. Also, if you haven't already, make sure you subscribe to the channel, and if you already are, then it's good to have you back.
Why are you fucking with me? Why are you fucking with me? Why are you fucking with me? Huh? Get the fuck back to work!
What bridges the connection between Carmy and food is his brother, who cooked with him all the time when they were children. In fact, the reason he became a chef was born out of spite, because his brother Michael wouldn't let him into the restaurant anymore, and would slowly cut communication with Carmy. In the first season, we are led to believe this was done deliberately out of malice, but as the show progresses, it's actually the opposite. He didn't let Carmy into the restaurant because it was a nightmare, and he was slowly becoming more unstable by the day. In season 4, we see Carmy try to chat with Mikey about making a restaurant, but there's more going on beneath the surface. You can tell that both Mikey and Carmy want to desperately tell each other how they feel. Carmy wants to vent to him about how much he ignores him, and how much he needs Mikey. Mikey, on the other hand, loves Carmy, but doesn't know how to show up for him, nor does he know how to fully support Carmy's dream. Not to mention the underlying subject of both Mikey and Carmy's trauma when it comes to their father, and neither knows how to fully approach it. Carmy talks about how this dream restaurant will be a place where people can come to be nurtured. A place where people won't have to worry about their problems and they can be happy there. It's quite clear in this scene Carmy isn't so much describing the people, but his own desires to make a place where he and his brother can leave their trauma behind and own a place that will bring them joy and satisfaction. When Mikey inquires about the name of the restaurant, Carmy at first suggests the name Mikey's, but Michael suggests another one, which is implied to be the Bear. While this may seem like a contradiction due to the information that was supplied to us previously,
how could you remember the name?
Because you're the bear, and I remember you.
I think it's defensible that Carmy would name it something else to try and get his brother on board, only for his brother to subtly remind him about the name they had chosen in high school previously. Regardless, the scene is all about a memory that Carmy always goes back to, because he's trying to live a life that he never had with Mikey, but is also haunted by not saying what he has always wanted to say to him after all this time. The music conveys that message through the lyrics in its soft, melancholic tone perfectly. The entire song has a constant repeating lyric that says, "I don't know how to tell you," that perfectly sums up that emotional paralysis he felt in the past, and the regret he feels now for not telling him sooner. This is what is often called the bargaining stage of grief, and we see that cemented through the lyrics and the dialogue, that it's clear that Carmy is thinking in if-onlys, if only I told him this, if only I told him that, when in reality, the things that you wanted to tell the person is something they most likely already knew in the first place. In this case, it's Carmy trying and failing to communicate a need to connect to his brother, to rebuild the bridge that has been broken between the two, to build something together, but was ultimately never meant to be. With the track's melody sounding like something from a memory, a moment in the past that has been held onto dearly, something that Carmy wishes he had gotten the answers to whether his brother cared as much as he did, whether he did want to open that restaurant with Carmy. We never really get that answer until we see how much he cares for Carmy in Season 2, Episode 6, where he is left upset when Carmy walks away to help his mother, after telling him about his plans for Michael's restaurant. So when he kills himself, Carmy is still trying to piece everything about Mikey together because he kept everything about himself from Carmy in those years he cut him off. The show also heavily emphasizes a lot of Christian imagery whenever Mikey's involved, either by highlighting the prayer card from Mikey's funeral, which shows Jesus, the Good Shepherd, holding on to one of his flock and or children, probably conveying that Michael laid down his life for everyone in the beef so he could leave them with a fresh start of sorts. Unfortunately, due to Carmy's immaturity, from the trauma he gained from his family and his journey to become the best chef, it's less of a fresh start and more of the same circumstances. Despite Carmy's obsessive efforts to try and make it work, he does it because he thinks by fixing the restaurant, he could fix the conflict between himself and his brother. It's also not helped by the fact that Carmy feels trapped in the sense that if this doesn't work out, then he would have nowhere to go, since being a chef is all he's good at. It's been shown throughout The Bear that Carmy is not exactly the brightest, he's not good with math, and he can't spell properly. The only other thing that has been hinted that he's at least somewhat good at is his artistic abilities. In fact, many characters often comment on how his drawings are abnormally good, but from an academic perspective, with Carmy's skill set, there's nowhere he can really go with his talent other than a restaurant. The first scene in the show is the best example of how far Carmy is willing to go to sacrifice his own soul just to make the restaurant work. He can't afford enough money for this week's beef, so he sells some designer jeans that seem very important to him because he hesitates when offering them to the buyer. It also shows how cooking in a way is his happy place, because as soon as he finds some money in the bowl breaker machine, he rewards himself by cooking. He also does this later in season 2 when the fire suppression test succeeds, and cooks some food in the restaurant, and later some for Claire, whom we will talk about shortly. It's such an integral first scene to emphasize the stress of what Carmy goes through on a day-to-day basis, that makes the final scene in the season all the more impactful because it is a mirror of the first scene. After Carmy uses his 2-week parachute for the restaurant to bail out Richie from prison, he has to go back to the restaurant to cook again to make ends meet. But as more and more problems stack up, like the meat delivery being wrong again, he sees in that moment that the stress is getting to him and that he can't keep this up forever. So when he turns the stove on and a fire spawns from nowhere, he decides in that moment to let it all burn down, and in doing so, letting all of his stress burn away in the process. Something that he actually lectured Marcus about in episode 5, and comes right back around in the finale.
I started a fryer fire, night after I won Food and Wine's Best New Chef, nearly burned the place down.
For real?
For real. And this weird thing happens, too. You have this minute where you're watching the fire and you're thinking, if I don't do anything, this place will burn down, and all my anxiety will go away with it.
And then you put the fire out.
And you put the fire out.
While Carmy does want to fix the restaurant, he also wants to fix it in the way he wants to, because of the negative association he's had with his brother over the past few years. This is why he constantly ignores Richie's suggestion of making spaghetti, because he wants to prove to not just Mikey, but to everyone else around him that he can make things work by doing things his way. Ironically, it's by making the spaghetti at the end of the season is how he saves the restaurant, and it's in that moment where he truly feels connected to his brother like he never left, with that moment being shared with the family around the table, eating food and enjoying each other's company. Not by trying to do things on your own, but by doing it together as a family can Carmy finally feel at peace. Throughout the first season, and let's face it, the entire show, Carmy has this level of pride to him where he thinks he can save the restaurant on his own, or if they do things his way, then everything will end up being okay. Unsurprisingly, this couldn't be further from the case, and by not listening to people, it causes many of the characters to go behind Carmy's back to do what they think is best for the restaurant. The best example of this lies in the episode review, where a lot of the problems that came from that episode were a byproduct of the characters not communicating with one another. Then there's the friends and family night where Carmy is trapped in the walk-in and thinks that everyone is screwing up, and thinking back to where they were at before Carmy had made them undergo training in season 2. Funnily enough, it's Carmy's lack of faith in them and his need to be the one in control that holds them back from being a functional restaurant. It's not until season 4 does Carmy recognize that they don't need him to function, and that they can do things on his own without him. In every season of The Bear, Carmy either doesn't communicate his issues or changes things without telling anyone. As many characters point out in the show, Carmy is an excellent chef, but a massive child.
Can't believe I'm taking orders from a fucking toddler right now. Yeah, bring your shit, you fucking baby, you fucking baby.
You need to calm down. I'm not your fucking babysitter.
A trait of Carmen's that becomes increasingly more apparent as you watch the show, which is what drove him to being the best in the first place. Although it's very clear that Carmen is the main issue within the show, that he is the other shoe, because while everyone is growing and changing, Carmy remains frozen in time. Which is where Claire comes in. Claire is quite an interesting character to me. While many see her as one-dimensional, I would actually disagree. I think we are mainly seeing her through the perspective of how Carmy sees her, a girl who can fix him. In actuality, Claire is very straightforward with Carmy. In their first interaction, the writers immediately showcase how different these two characters are. Claire likes to try and understand the thing, whereas Carmy doesn't care to understand it and only really wants to fix the problem. Claire's need to understand the problem immediately scares Carmy a little, as his first instinct at the end of their conversation is to give her the wrong number and pray that she never contacts him again, which is heavily emphasized in an earlier scene.
My number is 773-555-0901.
I'll just get your contact information.
It's 773-555-0902.
Their entire dynamic leads to a relationship where Claire slowly eases him out of his comfort zone more and more, and eventually ends with Carmy transforming his trauma from the cannoli dish, which goes from a reminder of his last Christmas shared with Donna and Michael, to something delicious. Richie also undergoes a similar process in season 2, but we'll talk about that more in a bit. Something that the show does with Claire is very interesting to me, and it's in almost every scene that she's in. She's always surrounded by something cold. The first time that Carmy and Claire see each other for years is in the frozen foods aisle, where Carmy is buying a sundae. Another shows her sitting on the imaginary cold prep. And their final scene together is Carmy locked in the refrigeration unit, paying off that icy cold imagery, with Claire being metaphorically left out in the cold, with Carmy trapped inside like a bear in a cage. He kinda has this realization that this other shoe mentality was never going to come from something he couldn't control. It's the fact that he is the other shoe. The significance of the fridge is interesting, as it gets transformed from something that is meant to represent Carmy's metaphorical and literal entrapment, and is now used to showcase Carmy's growth. In season 3, we see that he is still frozen within that mental space to illustrate Carmy's static development throughout season 3, which is why he refuses to call Claire within the walk-in. Whereas in season 4, he decides that enough is enough and that he won't be using the refrigerator as a crutch, something that can shield him from the outside. He decides to finally tell Claire how he feels one-on-one. Later on in season 4, it is used once again for privacy so that Carmy could apologize and thank Cicero for the opportunity of providing him a restaurant. What was once a barrier from everyone else and a space used for the processing of his own internal pain is now utilized for the growing from his mistakes and apologizing. In a way, it's a space that reflects his own mental state. Tomorrow is the season 3 premiere that is the mental spiral following his entrapment inside the walk-in freezer. Memories, regrets, and half-healed wounds looping endlessly. It reflects how Carmy lives, with one foot in the past, one in the kitchen, and his brain moving too fast to rest. In fact, the first shot of the episode is Carmy looking at a scar he obtained from grabbing a pan that was on the stove to try and block out the pain from Mikey's death so he could focus on the work, which is a reference to a conversation that Carmy and Claire have in season 3 episode 4 titled Violet. During the conversation, the subject slowly is changed towards this girl that Claire had to operate on, who fell through a glass table and was bleeding everywhere. After the operation, she was sad that this girl would have scars all over her body for the rest of her life, but when the girl woke up, she couldn't stop laughing because she didn't realize it had hurt yet. The point of the story is not really about the girl, but more on Carmy. Carmy has mentally been in surgery for years now. He's had to deal with his brother's suicide, the intensive training he had to go through to become the best chef, his family, and now his relationship with Claire. But the thing is that Carmy never actually felt it until after that night when he was locked in the freezer, which is partly why we see everything in a non-linear structure from Carmy's mind. Everything is rushing back to him as he's desperately trying to make the pain go away, and he's doing that by focusing even more on the restaurant. Similar to how he coped with Mikey ignoring him, he is forcing himself deeper into working on the kitchen and the food, instead of on himself. And we see that progression of Carmy's food throughout the episode as a way to illustrate his ever-growing skill set as a chef and his state of mind. One of my favorite examples of this is the way the hamachi with blood orange dish evolves throughout the episode. It originally begins as Carmy's own creation, but is quickly dismissed by Chef David as he tells him to remove all the components that make his dish original, to substitute them with Chef David's components. When Carmy hears that, he hesitates because in his mind he knows that his components would work better with the dish, but he does it anyway. However, when he tries Chef David's version of the dish, he hates it. Something doesn't taste right about it, so he switches it back to the original design and ships it out, saying that he substituted the fennel because of an allergy. Ironically, it's because of Carmen's little act of rebellion in this scene is what inspires Sydney to continue trying to passionately evolve through the food. In fact, this scene is mirrored earlier in season 1, where Sydney makes this one dish that she's really proud of, but Carmy tells her that it's not ready yet. Despite Carmy's attempts at trying to stop her, she gives out the dish anyway, where a critic just so happened to be visiting the restaurant. The way it's paralleled showcases just how the restriction of freedom and creativity in the restaurant is what is setting Carmy back, and is the trauma that he needs to work through, which is later paid off in season 4, when Sydney makes the scallop deep dish, and it explodes in popularity. Unsurprisingly, it's the dish that she poured her creative soul into is the one that ends up creating more media attention for the bear, showing that it was never Carmy and his status that made up the restaurant, it was the people around him who are now able to creatively flourish because of this new environment they've conjured up. One of Carmy's main sources of trauma comes from Joel McHale's character, whom we constantly see throughout the show. He is a voice, one that lives inside Carmy's head, who shapes how he leads, how he sees himself, and how he defines greatness. One of the lessons that he teaches Carmy is to subtract the ingredients and to simplify the plate. This could also be seen as metaphorical though, as Carmy takes that lesson to heart and subtracts any emotion he has, which made him struggle to communicate with anyone. Subtracting the people in his life, he pushes away Claire, ignores any kind of input from Sydney, and walls himself off from anyone who tries to get close. In a way, by letting this person get to him, he has effectively subtracted parts of himself, as he barely has a life outside of cooking, and takes on a more perfectionist mindset throughout season 3. To the point where the food takes priority over anyone else in his life.
If it's not perfect, it doesn't go out.
Yeah.
Okay?
Because Carmy is so obsessed with focusing on perfection, he fails to see any of the good in front of him. A big plot point in season 3 is that Ever, a restaurant that he worked at for a while, is closing down. And when anyone tries to talk to him about it, he fails to recount much from the restaurant because of how focused he was on trying to be the best. So he decides to start drawing again like he did in Copenhagen, because he never properly reflected on those memories. So now that the place is shutting down, he's looking back on those past memories more fondly. It seems like he doesn't learn anything from this though, as he keeps moving forward the same, trying to strive for perfection despite the warning signs ahead. Although maybe he does learn something. In the season 3 finale, everyone from the bear attends Ever's funeral as the place is shutting down. We get 3 extremely crucial scenes that pave what road he goes down next. The first is the opening scene of the season 3 finale, where Carmy is lectured by Thomas Keller on how to properly remove the wishbone. As Keller shows him how to carefully remove it and scrape it with a knife, he goes on to talk about how the job of a chef is to nurture people. It's about catering to people's needs and blowing their minds. However, when Keller finishes explaining the process and walks away, Carmy quickly disassembles the wishbone and places it next to the other in a matter of seconds. The final shot of that scene tells you everything without saying a word at all. Keller's wishbone is clean, and you can tell that it has been treated delicately, whereas Carmy's looks rough and ragged, clearly trying to save time and get it perfect above everything else. It's the trauma that he inherited from Chef David that instilled that mindset that he needs to keep going faster and that the food needs to be perfect. And you can see that reflected in Carmy's restaurant. While the food may be perfect, Carmy doesn't care about nurturing people. That much is shown in the 3rd episode, where Richie and Carmy argue about mushrooms in someone's order. When finding out that the customer doesn't have an allergy towards them and only dislikes the taste, he remains insistent on putting them in the dish, showing that he is not there to nurture, but only there to make the food perfect. This constant rebuttal against perfectionism is not just an overarching theme in season 3, but something that has been there since the 1st episode.
Delicious or impressive?
Delicious is impressive.
It's not about how impressive the dish looks, I mean sure that factors into it, but it's also about how it tastes, the experience you get out of it. and how you nurture people through that experience. Advice that Carmy finally took to heart in the penultimate episode of season 4, where he cooks his mother a chicken as a way of taking care of her after her apology. This moment was the true test to prove whether or not Carmy was willing to change for the better. Throughout the entire course of the show, Carmy has been running away from his responsibilities and using the restaurant as a vessel to distract himself from his own issues. But in this scene, Carmy is finally confronting that family trauma that has burrowed in his mind for decades now. He's always been trying to take the easy way out, but now he's decided to take the hard way no matter how much he doesn't want to. He is finally willing to listen to what his mother has to say. The acting on both Jeremy Allen White and Jamie Lee Curtis sells the pain and anguish that they are both going through in that moment. Carmy is reliving the family trauma as he listens to Donna's apology, and Donna is trying her hardest to make things right after making it so wrong for all those years. What hits the hardest in this scene for me is not the speech itself, although that too is completely gut-wrenching, but the desperate look of approval that she seeks from Carmen as she finishes her apology. She knows that she's fucked up, she knows that she has ruined her son's life with her abuse, but she's asking, how she's begging in this moment without any words whatsoever, for some form of forgiveness or acceptance from Carmen. And the way Carmy responds isn't with anger or frustration, but with his confession of his own guilt that he's been feeling throughout the show. He feels awful that he left without saying goodbye, and it's through that moment of courage that Donna and Carmy can bond together. At first, Donna tries to volunteer to make Carmy something, but Carmy makes her something to eat instead. It's through this act that we see the way that Carmy nurtures someone through the food, and it's not for just a random customer in the restaurant, but for his own mother, whom he had resented so much for all those years. Him saying that he will make her something to eat is a gesture of love to her. It's an act of love, but it also ties together what Donna and Sydney said to each other about family.
You see, that's exactly what I was talking about.
What do you mean?
Well, what I was saying, like, sometimes your work family is closer to you than your family family.
Oh, well, I mean, sometimes I feel like your work family is like part of your family though, you know? Like, it's one big family.
Yeah, if you're lucky.
Right after that scene, we see Carmy wandering around the house he used to reside in, as the song Save It For Later plays. The song is used quite often throughout both season 3 and 4 of The Bear, to emphasize the emotions that Carmy has compartmentalized as he is pushing his grief aside in order to save it for later. But I think its use in this scene is the ultimate payoff to what it has been building up to. Here we see Carmy finally confronting the later that he has been avoiding for so long. He willingly listens to his mother apologizing and serves her food as he looks over at the dinner table and sees the chair that Michael used to occupy is empty. He looks through his old childhood bedroom, metaphorically looking in the past to a version of himself he left behind to pursue that aspiration to become the best chef. This moment serves as reflection and nostalgia for Carmy. Although another way of looking at it is to reflect Carmy's feeling of being adrift, about not knowing his place in the world, in a way to illustrate that Carmy is stuck between adolescence and adulthood, a person who is now grown but never actually grew up because of his familial trauma. In fact, while I was doing research for this video, I found this quote from Dave Wakeling, where he talks about the song's meaning and that it is practically one-to-one of my interpretation.
I wrote it when I was a teenager, and it was probably about turning from a teenager to someone in their 20s. And realizing that the effortless promise for your teenage years was not necessarily going to show that life was so simple as you started to grow up. So it was about being lost, about really knowing your role in the world, so you couldn't find your way in the world, and you'd have all sorts of people telling you this, that, or the other, and advising you, and it didn't actually seem like they knew any better. So it was like, keep your advice to yourself, save it for later.
Going back to what I was saying before though, my second example would be from Chef Terry's speech during the Ever funeral, where we see her reminiscing the past. She got to see the beauty of working somewhere where she got to see people grow up with each passing year, with each generation showing their children the restaurant, where she goes on to say what may be one of the most important lines within the context of the whole show.
And I think what I've learnt over the years is people don't remember the food. It's the people that they remember.
Which plays hand in hand with Keller's mentality of being a chef. And at the end of the day, the food is not important. It's the people you surround yourself with that are. Whether that be your family, friends, or the people you serve, Being a chef is about creating an environment where you can love and care for them, which beautifully contrasts with Carmy's second most important interaction, ironically with Chef David himself. As Carmy attends the funeral for Ever, he sees Chef David there and finally dares to confront him about all the trauma he went through. He enters into a fantasy confrontation with David, expecting to get a personal win for himself, but what he gets is the exact opposite. He opens up by deliberately mispronouncing Carmy's last name, pretending to forget him, and acting like Carmy isn't all that special. This already throws Carmy a little off kilter, but he continues with what he has to say, and he proceeds to dismiss it and knocks on Ever's decor as he leaves by saying,
"Still have these, huh?"
As he walks away, Carmy is desperate for some kind of recognition or attention from him after everything he put him through, so he quickly lets out the words,
I think about you too much.
And David still doesn't care. He says that he doesn't think much about him at all, and that he made him into an excellent chef. Despite the number of times Carmy tries to get something out of Chef David, he receives nothing in return except for cruelty. Even when Carmy tells him that his life stopped, he just replies by saying,
"That's the point, right?"
To him, the damage wasn't collateral, it was the method. He believes what he did worked. He doesn't think he was cruel, he thinks he taught Carmy how to survive, and because Carmy succeeded, David sees himself as vindicated. In his worldview, you don't become great without losing everything else. Family, love, balance, those are distractions. He sees Carmy's pain as proof that the method worked. Carmy subtracted all the things that he saw as useless in his life and made him into his own image. As Chef David walks away, all Carmy is left with is confirmation that everything he did, all the stress and pain he made himself undergo, was for nothing. He only did it to try and make a person who doesn't care about him at all satisfied. However, what comes from this realization is important, as this is one of Carmy's first steps to realizing that the mindset about the food needing to be perfect, about how nurturing is bullshit, could all be an incorrect mindset, and a wake-up call for him to correct his ways. This is later reinforced by his conversation with Chef Terry, and is one of the most important conversations he'll ever have in the show. This scene is a reflection of two chefs, one who is ending and starting their careers. In a way, Chef Terry's retirement is kind of a death and rebirth. She doesn't want to keep running a restaurant for the rest of her life. While it was very fulfilling to her at points, she also wants to experience life for what it is. Hence why her reply to Carmy about just getting started is so poignant. Carmy's reply even more so, as he says,
It feels like I've been starting forever.
Capturing how burnt out and lost he is now. After that conversation with Chef David, he has probably lost some of that passion for the craft itself, and came out to rethink things. He goes on to mention how much this place meant to him, and that he learned a lot by being there. Throughout the course of Season 3, one of the things that weighed heavily on Carmy's mind was regrets. One of them being his regret for not fully appreciating Ever for what it was, for not appreciating what he learned there. Instead of fully immersing himself in the environment, he hopped from one place to the other, learning what he needed to, and then left. Now that Ever is closing, he will never be able to fully appreciate those moments again. But at the end of the day, despite it being a bit too late, Carmy still manages to thank Chef Terry, and tell her how much it all meant to him. While he never did get to appreciate Ever when he went there, he can still appreciate it now. Chef Terry proceeds to give him some advice, saying
that you have no idea what you're doing, and therefore you're invincible.
A line that really cuts deep for Carmy. He has been going through life trying to be the best, trying to make the food perfect, but what Chef Terry tells him is different. It's okay to fail forward, to be a human being. Carmy has been subtracting parts of himself for his whole life, as a sacrifice to be the most efficient chef he can be. But after his conversation with Chef David, he realizes that in doing so, he's wasting his life away and making himself more miserable. He needs to let go and start learning to appreciate himself and the food more. Ironically, it's the absence of food that makes the scene more striking, which I feel was intended by the creator of the show. The previous scene with Carmy was just about how being obsessed with the food and trying to make it perfect was a bad thing, so it makes sense that this conversation with Chef Terry would be without any real mention of it. This scene shows how much food has taken over Carmy's life, and I believe that helps give Carmy some clarity for the first time in a very long time, in turn causing him to put his family first over the restaurant. This is shown when Natalie brings the baby into the workspace, and Carmy drops everything to meet the newest member of the family, which leads us into Season 4. It's clear that it has become more apparent than ever to Carmy that he doesn't enjoy doing this anymore. A way that Season 4 shows this is through the recurring Groundhog Day motif, where every day feels exactly the same to Carmy with no sign of tomorrow, but it goes deeper than that. The plot of Groundhog Day shares a lot of similarities with the bear and Carmy's character. In Groundhog Day, the main character Phil starts off as a narcissistic and overbearing individual who relives the same day over and over again until he learns to change for the better. Both Carmy and Phil are emotionally numb and selfish, who both try to escape their problems by closing themselves off. In Carmy's case, instead of trying to escape a literal time loop, he tries avoiding the responsibility of his actions, the death of his brother, and the trauma that came from his family by burying himself further in the work and creating an unhealthy work environment for everyone in it in the process. The way Carmy metaphorically breaks through his time loop is by putting things right with everyone and apologizing. He apologizes to Claire for his fear of commitment, and proves himself to Claire that he has changed, to the point where Carmy makes a breakthrough in his behavior, which is when he compliments Claire for the first time, rather than getting too scared to commit to anything, or apologizing for his unease while being around her. Season 4 makes it clear that the only way Carmy can finally move forward in life by putting things right is by apologizing. Hell, even Tina says it.
Apologized? Yeah. I can't have that shit hanging over my head. It makes you make bad decisions. Yeah.
Through that, he breaks through the loop and trauma that have been holding him back for all these years. This season is Carmy's most important, as he starts to finally learn how to grow and change as an individual, and find things outside of the restaurant that provide him with amusement and joy. In Season 2, he finds the idea of fun and joy a terrifying concept to him, as he's never experienced any of that outside of the kitchen. So the second he does find something that brings him any form of joy, he shuts down and tries to run away. In this season, we actively see Carmy go out of his comfort zone to do things that bring him joy. We see this at the beginning of episode 5, when Carmy immerses himself in the culture of Chicago to the sound of the song Let Me Live in Your City and It's Magic, two songs that fit perfectly with the message they're trying to convey through Carmy. The first song, Let Me Live in Your City, is a song all about longing and the desperation to belong somewhere. In this scene, Carmy is looking for inspiration and trying to figure out where he belongs in the world. If it's not the restaurant, then where does he belong? Not to mention this one line from the song that says, "I'm just a traveler, eating up my traveling time," which is most likely a reference to how Carmy never stops for a second. He always has to keep going from place to place in order to not think about his trauma. The part that talks about eating up his traveling time is likely in reference to how he wastes his time doing something that doesn't bring him any satisfaction. Coming back around to the Groundhog Day motif of every day feeling exactly the same, he burns through time without truly living. Something that Carmy is working through in this montage by spending time trying to live and experience life. The second song, titled It's Magic, is a callback to the beginning of the episode, where a woman from AA talks about how she left her brother in charge of the house as she left for a few days. She made him promise that he wouldn't get up to any mischief and would hold him responsible for watering the plants. When she got back though, the house was in complete disarray, and her brother was found in the tub, clearly on something, singing the Doris Day song, Magic, a song that their deceased mother used to love. The woman begins to cry upon seeing him, but the brother tries to reassure her by saying that he watered the plants. There are a couple ways to look at this scene. The first is that the story is meant to reflect Carmy. Carmy watering the plants in this case would be making incredible food, whilst neglecting everything else that is needed in order for a restaurant to function. This is supported when the song plays during the episode, and it cuts to every character stressing about something, partially as a result of Carmy's abuse in the previous seasons. The second way to look at it is Carmy seeing for the first time that other people than himself also go through the same thing that he's going through, like what Claire said in episode 3.
It's loud in there.
Yeah.
It's loud for me too. Loud for everyone.
That scene showcases his empathy for that person, and recognition as to what he had to go through dealing with his brother as well. Personally, I think that both interpretations are correct. Carmy is realizing that other people hurt too, while cutting to all the people that he has negatively affected. Richie being one of many whom Carmy had deeply hurt, and their relationship had not quite recovered since the walk-in incident. One of the most significant scenes with them is at the start of episode 2, where Carmy is sitting at the end of service, thinking of his mistakes. Richie sees this and decides to cross the border that has been separating them for nearly 2 seasons now, and we see a massive blue light shining on Carmy. The use of blue lighting in the bear is usually used to convey negative emotions. Here it is meant to convey Carmy's feelings of guilt, regret, and sadness. While the blue light isn't as heavy on Richie, he too feels guilty and is worried that Carmy may resent him. It's 2 people who want to tell each other how they feel desperately, but just can't quite get the words out, similar to the Mikey flashback at the beginning of season 4. They both choose to save it for later, or in this case, tomorrow.
I'll see you tomorrow. Today.
What?
Today's tomorrow, cousin.
As the scene is meant to also convey that Carmy can't tell one day from the other, and emphasizes that feeling of living the same day over and over, and the limited time they have before the restaurant closes. I find the usage of time this season to be quite interesting. On a surface level, it can be seen as how it has been shown in every other season of The Bear, to be a plot device to convey tension to the audience. However, I have a different interpretation for the clock this season, which is that Carmy is utilizing what little time he has to make amends. He sees that the restaurant may be closing within a few months, and is given a choice. He can either put things right with the people he loves and leave the restaurant, or he can keep operating the same way he's been operating ever since the beginning and burn it to the ground. The way that Carmy comes to terms with leaving the restaurant is really sweet. The way he slowly confronts that grief that has been haunting him is so beautiful. He realizes that he doesn't have anything to prove. The only thing he's been doing is stopping himself from being happy. I do appreciate though that Carmy does get some form of closure this season in regards to his brother. Yes, Carmy did get the note from his brother, but he clearly wanted more, and I liked that the way he got that closure was through Uncle Lee of all people. All Carmy ever wanted from Michael was to tell him that he was proud, and he got that. Granted, it may not have been the way he wanted it, but I think the way it was delivered was good enough for him to move on. The journey Carmy takes in season 4 isn't just about self-acceptance and healing, but also about deciding what he wants to leave behind for the future of the restaurant. This was a topic that season 3 touched upon lightly, with Carmy talking about how he wants to leave behind a place of calm and happiness. Season 4 tackles the subject more frequently. There's this one really poignant moment in the season where a customer wants to try the original Chicago beef sandwich, and as Richie is about to send it out, Carmy stops Richie to take extra time to prep it himself. He makes sure the presentation is on point, and that the sandwich is cut just right. To Carmy, this isn't about the order, this is about honoring Michael's legacy. I think Carmy not trying to fix the sandwich in any major capacity, just making sure it's respected, is Carmy making peace with his brother's memory. Before, he was trying to improve the restaurants by changing the recipe of the menu for the beef, trying to prove to everyone that he could make it work, but now he's content with what his brother has done, which is what makes it nice to see that the beef is the one that is actually doing a lot better compared to the bear. It's revealed quite early on within the show that Michael had always wanted to franchise the beef, and the fact that it's doing so well to the point where it's spreading to multiple locations is something that I really liked in season 4. My favorite moment though comes from Carmy giving Sydney his spoon. While this may not seem like much, the spoon was originally Chef Terry's, which he passed on to Carmen as a vote of confidence and trust. Carmy passes on the spoon to Sydney for the same reasons, but also because he wants to leave behind something that she will remember him by when he leaves the restaurant. I like how Carmy learns to let go of that need for validation, as he starts to understand that legacy isn't about proving something to others that he tried to do from the start, but it's about what you leave behind for the people you care about, and how you shape their lives in return. It all culminates into a very intimate finale as Sydney, Carmy, and Richie all clear the air with each other, with Carmy's promise of taking them there. Richie and Carmy finally addressing that tension between each other with Richie's jealousy of Carmy, and Carmy telling him how he was there at the funeral the whole time, but never went in. Carmy's apology to Richie is probably the most hard-hitting in the show, because of that constant tension between the two. It didn't start at the end of season 2, it was there since the very beginning of the show, and it's powerful seeing both of them own up to their mistakes, as hard as it is for them to admit. As they share the same cigarette while admitting these things that have been bottled up since the start, the cigarette acts as a metaphor for their shared pain.
Sorry, you're wearing a suit?
Yeah, I wear suits now.
The best way to describe Richie and the Bear is about a man who finds his purpose, how the show explores Richie obtaining said purpose, and how he remains consistent with it each day. In season 1, it's easy to mistake Richie as malicious, when in reality he's just lost. When Carmy starts to change things around in the kitchen, he's actively against it, as he feels like Carmy is going against Michael's tradition and trying to change what Michael had worked so hard to accomplish. Not only that, but with the restaurant changing, it would mean that Richie would have to accept the fact that Michael is dead. While Richie is partially right about Carmy, Carmy does have the restaurant's best interest in mind, as the way the restaurant operated before was not a method that worked. Throughout the course of season 1, you can see how desperately Richie clings onto Michael's tradition and attempts to reject any kind of change in the restaurant. He actively talks negatively about Carmy, he tries talking to the crew in the same way he would if Mikey was there, which seems to be a coping mechanism for Richie to try and not have to think about Mikey's death. And when things are going well, and when Carmy and the crew have a good system going for them, Richie tries doing it again, except this time instead of the crew accepting his bullshit, they reject it and try to get back to work. So he lashes out on Sydney, who tries talking to him. When Tina talks to him, he tries blaming it all on Carmy, but Tina grounds him by stating that Carmy has changed things for the better, and that Richie can't quit because he has nowhere else to go but here. After that conversation, you can tell that Richie's attitude changes a bit. While he's not completely content with moving on, he does seem to be making some amount of progress. It's not until the season 1 finale does he have one of his biggest character moments where he hands Carmy a letter from his dead brother that he's been keeping from him, because if he gave it to him, that would mean that he'd have to accept that Mikey was gone. Although while he did solve that problem, he still has another to deal with, his purpose. Throughout some of the first season and a majority of the second, Richie actively tries to find ways to be useful and to find purpose. While he doesn't know he's looking for purpose yet in the first season, you can tell that subconsciously, his actions dictate that he is lost and looking for some kind of meaning. One thing that I appreciate the show for doing is establishing what Richie's purpose would be early on, that being a leader in hospitality and service. Like in the season 1 finale, when everyone is attempting to carry the tomato cans with their hands, Richie simply gets a tray and stacks the tomato cans on them and carries them to where they need to go. One of my favorite examples of this would be in the episode Fishes, where Richie is tasked by his then pregnant wife to get her a Sprite. On a first viewing you don't think about it too much, but it pops up later in the show when Natalie is pregnant and Richie asks her if she wants a Sprite. It's a subtle one that you probably won't catch at first, but shows that service and hospitality mindset that Richie abides by. Because of that need for purpose, it lands him in a week-long retreat set up by Carmy, where his purpose is to dry forks. Before, Richie has made his stance on fine dining very clear and thinks that he is above it all, and in this episode he is no different until he has that conversation with Garrett. Honestly, this conversation could be an entire video on its own, that's how good it is, but we'll only cover what we need for this portion. At this point in the episode, Richie doesn't care. He thinks that this is just something that Carmy did to get rid of him for the week. Even when he first enters into the restaurant, the music sounds grossly intimidating, like he has just entered onto the enemy fleet. And to add salt to the wound, he is forced to cover up his Chicago beef shirt for a more professional look. A shirt that he closely resembles with Michael, and his personality is forced to be covered up. It's very clear that Richie doesn't want to be there until Garrett gives him a pep talk. When Garrett says these 6 words,
"And I need you to respect yourself,"
Richie's demeanor changes entirely. Those were the words that Richie needed to hear, and from that moment on, Richie started to take himself more seriously. But after those 7 days, Richie will have to go back to the bear yet again, without a purpose. Which is when Richie has his second most important conversation that episode with Chef Terry, giving him an entirely new meaning to the motto, "Every second counts." At the beginning of the episode, it was seen as quite an intimidating mantra, but by the end of it, you get to see the true meaning of the phrase. It's not just about being at your most efficient, it's about those little moments, no matter how small, are about being mindful and connected. That every second is a moment to, as Richie puts it, blow some minds. And I find it interesting how it parallels Mikey's saying in a way. Both are mantras used by the main characters to make something happen, for progress to be made. Not to mention the way in which Carmy uses it is very different compared to how Richie took it. Carmy most likely took the meaning in a literal sense, that every second counts, so you should try and go as fast as you can, but he fails to see how it is a combined meaning. Yes, you should try and go as fast as you can, but also be present in the moment, because if you aren't, then moments like this can happen. What really ties everything together though is the usage of forks being the main item that Richie has to clean, seeing how at the end of the previous episode, the main source of conflict was a fork. It's poetic irony that Richie would be stuck cleaning forks, almost as if he is metaphorically cleansing his own trauma by working there. While it's not outright shown, it is implied that by doing this, Richie is coming to terms with his own trauma and the death of Michael. In fact, it's by using those skills he learned from the Forks episode, he is able to lead the team to victory at the friends and family opening of the restaurant, while Carmy is stuck in the walk-in. It's not just the friends and family opening though. Richie applies himself throughout the rest of the season by listening and serving others in subtle ways, whether that's by purposely messing up the table set to see if any of the applicants try to fix it, or my personal favorite, when Richie serves Cicero the chocolate banana, something that was previously mentioned in Fishes when Cicero told his wife about the time he believed in Richie. The chocolate banana was something that reminded Cicero of his childhood and possibly his father as well, so by giving Cicero the chocolate banana, it is effectively his way of not only telling Cicero, "Thank you for believing in me," but also as a way to make his night extra special by bringing him back to his childhood. While Season 2 ends on a high note for Richie, Season 3 adds a new layer of internal conflict for his character. Sure, he may have found his purpose, but the real challenge is maintaining that passion for said purpose every day, especially when someone like Carmy is trying to restrict his ability to nurture people. As each episode passes, you can see him progressively struggle further, to the point that he even messes up the speeches that he always has planned for the employees. The resolution to this conflict is told to us by Jessica, that it's about surrounding yourself with people better than yourself. Something that Richie does in the finale. Richie goes to a party with all these people from Ever and has a great time with them. And as a nice way to close off Richie's arc for the season, we see him feeding the inflatable hot dog some alcohol, contrasting to what he was like in Season 1, where he was annoyed by the presence of it, showing us that Richie has fully embraced that silly side of him. He knows who he wants to be and has found his passion, all of it tying into another plotline where his daughter told him that he was lonely, and the season ends with him surrounded with friends and what he considers to be family. While Season 3 ends on a narrative high point for him, there is still the unavoidable wedding that is on the horizon, which Season 4 makes the focal point of Richie's conflict this season. It's not even the wedding really that is his main source of conflict of stress. It's the fact that once the wedding happens, it'll feel like things will change for the worse and that he'll be shut out from having that father-daughter bond permanently. So the whole season is this ticking clock of anxiety till we get to the wedding. While the wedding is important for many characters, like Carmy's conversation with Lee, Sydney finding her place with choosing the bear over Shapiro, and many, many more, I would argue that Richie's character is the focal point of the episode. I mean, he himself literally says it.
And he's looking at it, he's like, maybe these rocks are like planets or countries. And he's like, oh no, what if they're families or people? And this garden is showing how spaced out everyone is from everybody else, how separated they are, how alone. And the only thing that's connecting them or touching them is this sand. And wow, he's like really moved, like really fucking moved by this. But I'm like standing here so relieved because I think I've been looking at this all wrong.
You're not one of the rocks?
I think I'm the sand, man.
He's the person who connects people together, and it's not only shown through the arc he goes through, but the way the wedding episode is structured. The episode starts with him and ends with him, showing how the episode makes his character the connective tissue of the episode. The character growth that Richie goes through is amazing. At the start he is stressing out about potentially never seeing his daughter again, and by the end he realizes that he's been looking at it wrong the whole time. He sees that he was never going to be replaced to begin with, and that Frank doesn't have as solid of a relationship as she does with Richie. By the end, he's no longer worried about being replaced, so much so that he's comfortable with leaving Frank and Eva on their own. Because of the moment that she had with the whole family, it gives Eva the confidence to dance with Frank, which I see as symbolic. At the start, Eva doesn't want to dance because of how she's at a weird stage in her life, where she can tell that her mother getting married is likely gonna change a lot of things, and that scares her. Partly because she's not as connected to Frank as she is to Richie, and also because she feels a little bit alone during this period. I think that's why the under the table scene is so pivotal. It gives Eva the confidence to open herself up to connecting with Frank, tying the themes of family and love together. Another source of conflict for Richie, and many others, is the limited amount of time the restaurant has. This has more of an effect on Richie compared to the others, due to the fact that the job he has is his purpose and the only thing left keeping him sane. Sure, while he could potentially get another job somewhere else, he'd struggle a lot more in finding one compared to everyone else, as they are professional chefs. This puts Richie in an odd position, where he is grappling with the reality that this job he has come to love, this newfound outlook on life, will soon be no more. We see him struggle with that most in episode 2, where he goes to a bar, and the program that he's watching even says,
"Squeezing that watch ain't gonna stop time."
To which he goes home to pray that the restaurant works out afterwards, which leads to the most wholesome moment in the show, where Richie is tasked with giving an ex-cancer patient snow in Chicago before they fly back to their hometown. Despite the gift budget being practically non-existent, Richie is still determined to find a way to make this girl's night. This entire plotline within the episode truly demonstrates how good the place can be if everyone works together and gets along like family. Carmy helps out the dish by making the presentation look more like the beef's. Richie gets told from the starman that the scallop is excellent and immediately credits Sydney for the work, and proceeds to compliment her as he's in the middle of doing something else entirely. It all flows so nicely, and you can tell that the environment is different. It seems like everyone is happy to be there and they're enjoying their jobs. What makes Richie truly happy is knowing that he has been able to take care of and nurture the customers, while also making them happy at the same time. And we see exactly that when the family gets to see the snow that Richie and the crew created. We see him smiling as he knows that this is what the job is all about, as everyone else in the restaurant comes out to see what Richie and the Facts have managed to accomplish, showing an early bit of foreshadowing as to what his true purpose as a person really is. He's the sand who brings everyone together.
I'm gonna get it through to you. You're not alone.
Sydney is quite ambitious, but also quite creative, to the point where it is both a blessing and a curse. Her ability to adapt has saved the kitchen numerous times, like in Season 1 Episode 5, where the fuse to the beef has been blown, and Sydney has the idea of turning the beef into an outdoor lunch service. This is foreshadowed early on in the episode, where we see a box that says camping supplies. Another example would be when she handled the street tussle going outside of the beef, that had the potential risk of driving away customers, because she, like Carmy, also believes that this place could be something special. Unfortunately, she's often kicked to the curb, or left to fend for herself when it comes to implementing any ideas within the kitchen. One of the best examples of this would be when Sydney and Carmy have to go out into the city to cleanse their palates for the new menu, but instead Carmy ditches her to be with Claire, leaving Sydney alone to do this task. Despite Carmy's shitty behavior, I do like that we explore Sydney going through this process of experimenting with different designs and ingredients for the food, and seeing these imaginary images that pop up as she tries the food, but in execution she totally sucks at it. It's that thing that we all have when we have an idea, and we think that idea is incredible, but when we execute it, it fails miserably. Although I do believe part of the reason why her dish is so messy and complicated is because of her deteriorating mental state when looking at all the restaurants that are shutting down around her, the stress from work, and the unbelievable amount of pressure she puts on herself. As an intermission period for Sydney, she decides to take a break to have a Sunday, which is where we get some great character work for Sydney, because it shows that connection that Sydney is starved for with her mother. She shares a Sunday all by herself, and as she looks around, she sees mothers with their daughters, everyone connected to the food except for her, playing into that theme of the bear that relates to family and shared connection with other people. Sydney doesn't have anyone in that moment to share a meal with. Carmy left her, her mother is gone, and everyone at the beef is busy transforming it into the bear, so she feels isolated, which reflects heavily on her meals. Throughout the course of the show, Sydney's meals are often criticized for having too much or too little acid in them. There's a lot of metaphorical and symbolic reasons as to what this could represent, but by far the strongest case I've heard as the acid representing the workspace and her current relationship with her co-workers, showing that in order to improve her work, she needs to be in a better environment, surrounded by better people, which is why she considers taking the job offer from Chef Adam, which changes in Season 4. Unlike the previous seasons, Carmy is more attentive, helps out whenever he can, is more open to other ideas than his own, and apologizes for his mistakes. This turn in behavior is what helps her bring out her true potential and passion within the restaurant, which we see at the start of Episode 3. At the beginning of the episode, we are greeted with a beautiful montage to the song Fast Slow Disco by St. Vincent. The montage displays Sydney's passion in the kitchen, making her dish with the camera, constantly swaying behind objects almost making it seem like a clock is ticking with the motion. The purple lights showing her passion with the blue showing her calm. This is Sydney's ultimate love for food, and we as the audience get to take a look inside her mind as we see the passion oozing through the lighting and cinematography. When she completes the dish, she hands it over to Carmy, and he gives it a taste and says that it's perfect. Usually Carmy would have something to criticize about it, saying that there's too much or too little acid, or refusing to put it up on the menu. But here he says that it is perfect, showing that the restaurant is functional, it's starting to gel now, that the environment is good. And Carmy is in a place where he can admit that a dish is of quality. Sydney is shocked by this, so she just assumes that it's alright, but Carmy says that it is so good that it has to go up. And you can tell by Sydney's face that she is so happy about that, which is where the fast slow disco music returns to the show. That passion is reigniting and her love for the restaurant comes back. However, part of the reason she doesn't take the job offer is because she doesn't want to enter into a completely new environment. Because 1, she's grown so close with all the people within the bear, and 2, she states to her dad that she doesn't know if she can do another job, that the bear has to be the job or she might end up giving up. So most of the interactions she has with Chef Adam are often in very cramped environments, or are framed to be cramped to emphasize how uncomfortable Sydney is. The main reason she wanted to work with Carmy in the first place is because of that one dish she tried that Carmy had made with the family tree in the background, once again emphasizing those themes of connection and family. Unfortunately, Sydney is stuck between a rock and a hard place, where she can either go for a better job with Chef Adam, well, maybe not that much better, but the point is that Carmy has been so abusive to Sydney and his other staff, which is heavily emphasized in the ending of Season 3, where Sydney has a panic attack, partly due to Carmy's actions being a direct result of her trauma, and the fact that she may have to leave her friends behind if she is taking up Chef Adam's offer, which is the main arc she goes through in Season 4, but more specifically in Episode 4, where Sydney is left to take care of her friend's kid, as she goes out to get some supplies for Sid's haircut. The episode itself is quite slow-moving, in quite a metaphorical sense as well, as the clock that is present throughout the show that haunts them, telling the characters to make every second count, is no longer present. Sydney isn't in any rush. The clock waits idly by for her to make a decision. At first she has trouble relating to and getting along with the kid, due to the fact that she has to be a temporary mother figure to this child, but doesn't know how to, because she had no prominent mother figure growing up. So she messes up quite a bit, like giving the kid some really bad and toxic advice that she doesn't register as such at first, but then corrects herself later on. As the episode progresses, they start to get along more and more, to the point where Sid feels comfortable bringing up the problems she's facing. You can tell that throughout her conversation, despite thinking she's making a decision, it's very clear that she doesn't want to leave the bear and wants to try and make it work again. Then, when it's implied that she made a decision by the end of the episode by calling Shapiro, we are tricked into believing that she chose him. She's just stalling further so she doesn't have to make the hard call. It's pretty clear that she was never going to pick him for 2 reasons. The first is the candy that she chewed on hurt her teeth after 1 bite, symbolically showing that she is choosing the sweeter option, and immediately paying the price for it. And also the fact that Shapiro mentioned good hair, something I wasn't all too familiar with, but when I looked it up, it's apparently a documentary about black women and their hair, which should be an immediate giveaway to how cringy the guy is. There are other small moments throughout the rest of the season that show that she is slowly becoming more confident in her choice of the bear. Like during this really cute scene during the wedding episode when Richie and Sydney dance together, which I think is such a beautiful development of their character arcs, where they started off as bitter enemies and are now just one of the closest people in the restaurant. It truly shows how far these characters have come in only the span of a year within the show, which makes what Richie says even more important when he says,
You never told me what you're nervous about.
Just a decision.
Okay. You think the right one?
I don't know. I think there's only one.
Richie doesn't pry or try to make a decision for her. He admires her and cares about her enough to respect her decision, while not knowing what she's making a decision on. But I'd say the best example would have to be Sydney's dream at the start of episode 8. The dream starts with a very out-of-character Sydney. Similar to Carmy's dream, things start going more and more wrong as the dream progresses. She talks about the fancy nature of the place, her ingredients, etc., and always feels the need to brag about it throughout, almost as if she's overcompensating for something. These things once again remind us that Sydney suffers from imposter syndrome, and stresses that all the money and effort she's poured into her career will be for nothing. She can't go on if the bear fails. The bear has to be the thing, or she simply won't be able to continue. Failing to her would mean that she is wasting both her own and her father's sacrifices. The stress becomes more unmanageable as the scene progresses, as the rain and crowds of people drown out what she's saying, giving off the impression that everything is so loud that she can hardly think or hear what her own thoughts are. She thinks that by simply ignoring the issue, it will go away, instead of trying to actively fix it. The scene then transitions into the theater, where we find a more normalized Sydney. The auditorium seems to represent the bear and this extravagant show that she and the staff have put on night after night. It makes sense that she would associate the performative acts with theater, because her mother used to be an actress and do plays all the time. I believe that part of her stress is the fact that she is aware that the restaurant is probably going to die out, despite her wanting to stay with them. In fact, that's been her main point of contention throughout the entire show, that the restaurant will shut down if they don't try hard enough. Hell, in the same episode, Sydney talks about the discussion of providing amusement and joy when it comes to being a business, and how they are the ones that often fail. But at the end of the day, she picks the bear because it is not only a place where she has family, but because of her ability to now be able to creatively thrive in that environment. After her dream, it seems to cement her decision to call Chef Adam and tell him that she wouldn't be able to come to work at this new restaurant, reflecting the fact that Carmy and his restaurant are pure chaos, but it's a place where Sydney can be her own creative self. Looking at Season 4 in retrospect, it makes sense why Carmy would come to the conclusion as to why he made Sydney the new owner of the bear. She has a lot of earned respect from the people who work there, like Gary, who talks about the wine popping with the fish, and how it tastes like it's $200 a bottle when it's $50. Sid responds to that saying that it's impressive, and Gary retorts by saying,
Well, I like that. It's very impressive.
Delicious is impressive, chef.
a line that Sid instills into Gary in the first episode of the show. So by Gary using that line back on her, it shows how her words and actions have made an impact within the restaurant. I like how Carmy tests Sydney in subtle ways throughout the season as well. He says early on to Tina that he wouldn't have been able to make the pasta in under 3 minutes, and when Sydney does it, she does it in under 3 minutes. Or the fact that he trusts Sydney enough to take care of the restaurant while he goes to see his mother, because he knows that she can operate it fine without him. It's the little things that make me truly appreciate how much Carmy has thought through this decision, and how, as hard as a decision it was to make, it was most likely the best outcome for him. He knows that Sydney is more passionate and driven than him, and can see that she can make the restaurant work.
I won't make a mistake again.
Yeah, you will. But not because you're you, just because shit happens.
Marcus is the only character in the show who closely resembles Carmy. Both characters are obsessive by nature, so much so to the point where Marcus starts sleeping in the restaurant because focusing on his donut is the most important thing to him in that moment. It's because of Marcus's obsession with the donuts that throws another wrench in the cog if it weren't already stressful enough. This love for donuts that Marcus has, once again, comes from a place of connection and family. Getting donuts and sweet treats was a time where everyone in the family was happy. While he never liked eating them, he did like the look of them, and this obsession with sweet treats was most likely exacerbated with his mother falling ill, so he bakes as a way to experience that happiness again. Bringing us to Season 2, where Marcus is tasked with going to Copenhagen to improve his skills, and when he gets there, both Marcus and the audience are greeted with an entirely new environment. It's no longer this loud, uncontrollable mess, but more so a quiet calm to it that eases us into the vibe of Copenhagen. He meets a chef named Luca, and not only does Marcus learn how to make a lot of new dishes, but he learns a very important lesson from Luca, which is that it's not about being the best or perfect, it's about honing your skill set to be better than you were before, which is helped by spending time away from the kitchen and the food, and instead using that time on other people and living life to the fullest. This advice is similar to the one that Carmy received from Keller in the Season 3 finale. However, the core difference here is that Marcus actually listens to the advice rather than pretending to follow along like Carmy did. A major theme regarding that episode is confronting your truths. Marcus has to learn that he can't be the best, and that's okay, because even if he wasn't the best, he will still progress further than he had ever dreamed of. Another truth that Marcus has to confront is when Marcus finds the old man trapped under the fencing. Instead of the man going to the hospital, he walks away and eventually Marcus does too. The meaning of this, or at least from what I was able to grasp, is that despite what happened, at the end of the day, Marcus is still okay, and he's able to move on from the experience. In the same way that Marcus's mother will eventually pass, but that's okay, because at the end of the day, he still moves forward, life still moves on. When Marcus finally comes back from Copenhagen, he makes a cannoli called the Michael, to which Carmy shows his appreciation by saying to Marcus,
Go down, huh?
a line that was said to Carmy by Marcus in the pilot episode in a way to show his respect for Carmy. Carmy now using this line shows everything coming full circle. The Michael is not only something that Carmy loves, but respects Marcus for doing in the first place. The Michael is a combination of everyone in the restaurant and what they represent. And what makes the Michael so special is not just the man himself, it's the combination of everyone. Again, that theme of family and togetherness is what drives it home. Unfortunately, that same night, Marcus's mother would pass away, and his exploration of that grief in Season 3 is quite beautiful. Instead of not dealing with it like Carmy did, Marcus deals with it in a healthy manner, where he transforms that grief into something beautiful. In Marcus's case, that would be working on a new dish that represents his mother, with the special ingredient being a white violet. This dish could be seen as foreshadowing, as we've seen Marcus look through violet colors in the color material book at the beginning of Season 1. Not to mention that a white violet represents innocence in most cases, something that could describe his mother, an innocent and delicate individual who loved her son with all her heart. This is discussed in Season 4, where Luca and Marcus have a conversation about trauma and food, and Luca says something astute about how the reason why their food tastes so good is because of the mess they go through to get there, reinforcing what I said earlier, transforming that grief into something positive in juxtaposition with Carmy's grieving process. Not only that, but the show outlines how important it is for Marcus to recognize that he didn't get to where he was today because he did it alone. He got to where he was because he openly worked with others and took constructive criticism to heart along the way. This can be traced back to the beginning of the show, where Marcus is quite irresolute around Carmy and takes his advice about baking, despite him not thinking it would even work to begin with. Only to be surprised that later the advice made his baking even better. He even credits Luca for being one of the main reasons why part of the component in the dish worked so well, to which Luca implies that he learned that trick from Carmy himself. Speaking of which, I think one of the things that Marcus and Carmy have in common with their arcs in this season is the confrontation of family and the generational trauma that comes with it. The main source of conflict that Marcus goes through this season is confronting his father, who had never supported Marcus and his mother, even when she became quite unwell. So obviously this is a big moment for Marcus, that despite everything his father put him and his mother through, is he willing to give his father another chance? At the beginning of the season, it's quite subtly laid out, like the scene he has with Richie, clearly a lot on his mind, and Richie even extends a hand telling him that he's there if he needs any help. But it's clear that he doesn't really want any. You can also tell from a technique that many filmmakers use, called shallow depth of field. Essentially, it's a technique that is used where part of the frame is in focus, while the rest of the background or foreground is blurred, usually to emphasize a character in deep thought, creating an intimate moment with the character, or for any other visual storytelling purpose really. In The Bear, this type of technique is typically used for the feeling of isolation and loneliness within the tight kitchen space. But here, it's used to show that while Marcus is listening to Richie about him being there for Marcus, he's not taking it in properly and is clearly focusing on something else. It's not until episode 3 that he outright states his discomfort with the fact that his father wants to get in touch with him. That discomfort of going back home, being alone with his father, that's something that Carmy can relate to. So instead of telling him to suppress it and focus on the work, he tells him to see the restaurant as a space where he is never alone, because it's like what Donna says in the episode Bears.
Sometimes your work family is closer to you than your family.
But it's one thing to temporarily deal with your issues, and another to avoid them entirely, and that is what Marcus's arc is about this season. While he is embracing his work family in the restaurant, he's running away from confronting his past traumas head-on like Carmy did. Throughout the season, we see Marcus trying to build up the courage to meet with him, and he almost does at one point, but doesn't go through with it. Interestingly enough, we see that the place that his dad had chosen is a bakery. However, once Marcus becomes the new best food and wine chef, he decides to set the stage and create a space where he is in more control by inviting him into his domain at the restaurant. The outcome of this will for now be left in the dark, but for what I can predict for season 5 is that Marcus confronting his father will in turn lead to some kind of confrontation with Carmy's father. I say this because he is the only character who we haven't seen throughout the show, and has only been described in detail by the other characters, so I think that we may be seeing him in season 5, especially since the season starts off with Carmy talking about his father, and later he, like Mikey, mentions how he no longer thinks about him. This is also the only obstacle that Carmy has not confronted as of yet, so I think that's what they may be tackling for the final season. In conclusion, The Bear often underscores a single vital point. Trauma doesn't disappear, but it can be transformed and overcome, not through self-isolation, but through the community of your friends and family. And one of the ways that characters overcome grief is through the food. Food in The Bear is less about perfection and unhealthy dedication, it's about family and the connection that comes from being together. Food is the vehicle of expression and love, but can also be a tool for chaos. Its importance is not always loud or overt in the metaphorical sense, but it's so constant and fucking pure through the show as a silent expression of love, grief, and identity. In the end, it's not the execution of the dish that matters, but instead the love that is poured into it, binding people together in moments that outlast the meal itself. Thank you all so much for watching. This video was kind of a long time in the making. I was originally hoping to have this out the day before Season 4 released, but a lot of difficulties arose during that time, and when I watched Season 4, I thought it would be kind of impossible not to include elements of Season 4 in that video, since they're all so integral to this video. So I really hope you all enjoyed, and if you did, be sure to leave a like, comment, subscribe, join the Discord, all that good stuff, and I'll see you all in the next one. Bye bye.